On the book of Job. And my, what an interesting series of things that Job has put together in his defense before his so-called friends. And we've been looking at some of the things that he has written down. He's got a lot more things yet to look at that he has written down in his defense. Things that we didn't even know till the Bible was given to us. And that was hundreds of years later than Job's day. And then there's the New Testament. He even makes some reference to things that's in the New Testament. But that's the way God works from time to time. It's just a whole matter of the fact that you got to go with the flow with God on these things. But so we're going to pick up where we left off. The very last verse we didn't get time to cover last week, verse 23 on this particular page. There's a lot more verses to follow. He here again is in reference to God. He, the Lord, increases the nations. All the nations in the world, literally is stating here, God increases the number of them. And he's done that down through the centuries. And several things to point out. Number one, God is always in charge of nations, whether they think so or not. Sometimes the rulers of a particular nation will be looking to do the things that pleases God. That don't happen too often. And at other times, they don't. And here we find that Job is pointing out the fact that God increases nations. He raises the number of nations. And then he destroyeth them. That's the opposite of that. He destroys them. Nations come and nations go. And as we pointed out earlier on, a few meetings ago, that the average life expectancy of any nation over the course of roughly 6,000 years that we have records of nations, the average is 200 years. When the nation is born, it lasts an average of 200 years, and then it's gone. God is always in charge of all of this. And if a nation does that which is in accordance with his will, there is great opportunity for him to bless that nation and make that a very successful nation. But if there is not the will of God that is on the hearts and the minds of the leaders of nations, well, they don't last too long. They just don't. Eventually, they come and they pass out of existence. Well, he, the Lord, enlarges nations. Now, this is different than increasing the nations. Here he is increasing the number of nations. Here he is increasing the size of the nations. And that's an interesting observation that Job here, under the inspiration of the Spirit of God that has given us this information from Job, the amazing that he increases the size of the nation. America today has about 336 million residents in the continental United States. And then you can go to places like China that got well over 1 billion people in their borders. And so you see some nations are increased and some are not. It's just amazing, but God is in charge of it all. And he, the Lord, straighteneth them again. The concept here is that sometimes the increasing or decreasing of the size of the nation or number of nations is due in part by whether or not they are godly or ungodly. The ungodly eventually pass out more quickly, and it's changed to another nation. And so it goes in the world that we live in. And he is pointing this out to his three friends here. He wants them to know that he knows. Well, verse 24. He, the Lord, taketh away the heart of the chief of the people of the earth. Now, the term chief is used here in a broad general way, but it's in reference to the leaders of nations, the governmental people that are in control. Whereas it's in America, we call him the president. We have a president, a vice president, and so on, Congress and Senate, and things of that nature. They fall in this classification of being chief because they are the ones who formulate how the nation grows, maintains its status in the affairs of the world, and so on. Other places they are called a king. And at other places they're called a dictator. And there's other names that are used for the chief or primary decision makers of government officials that determine the direction, either in a godly direction or an ungodly direction. Ancient Israel, they had the rule of God to begin with. They had no king. They had no president. They had no chiefs. It was God. And then they said, the people came and said, we want a king like everybody else that lives around us. And they were very insistent. So God said, I will give you a king. And he did. That was King Saul. He was the epitome, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, what the people wanted. And of course, God knew exactly what they wanted. He was not a godly man. He tolerated godliness for a while. But very quickly, everything deteriorated for him. And he ultimately took his own life. And then they were followed by King David. David was a godly king. And though he had a lot of problems personally as nationally, he still overall would have been classified a godly king. And then his son, King Solomon, became the third king of Israel under a united nation where all 12 tribes was under the leadership of one king. And when he died, the kingdom split. The majority of nations, 10 went north, 2 went south. 2 separate, divided. The kings in the north, there were a number of them. Every single king of the northern kingdom was not godly. They rapidly deteriorated. And finally, God sent judgment upon them, and the people were overrun by the Assyrians, and the northern kingdoms disappeared. The southern kingdom had about half that were godly and half that were ungodly. They lasted a little longer. But eventually, the ungodly won them out. And then God took them away in the Babylonian captivity. But this is just to show you and to illustrate this whole matter about God, taketh away the heart of the chief of the people of the earth and causes them to wander in a wilderness where there is no way, meaning there is no godly leadership when they're in that condition. And nations rapidly deteriorate to a point they go out of existence, either overrun by other kingdoms and nations, or they just simply cease not to exist any longer. An example of that in modern times was in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Nobody saw it coming. The insiders didn't see anything. They figured everything was going on. There was the United States and the Soviet Union were classified as equal world powers that kind of held each other in check. But then, the Soviet Union, within 24 hours, came to an end. And nobody knew it until it actually happened. So, we see how God deals with various nations and people. And when you read the histories and read it looking for the clues of what's going on, Job knew these things. Now, how did he know these things? There was no Bible at that time for him to read to find out. But again, the word of mouth of godly people from generation to generation would pass these truths down. And that's how he ended up with them. And he was a very smart and a very wise man. Verse 25, continuing from what's going to happen from verse 24 with these nations that fall apart. They grope in the dark without light, and he, the Lord, maketh them to stagger like a drunken man. Yeah, they reach that point. They can't even make simple decisions correctly. And all the time, God does this and permits this and even orchestrates it on times because of their ungodliness. And yet you would think, why don't we learn? Why don't we learn? But we never seem to. We never seem to learn. We just don't pay any attention. We just think everything is going to go along somehow, some way. And it ends in tragedy. Well, Job chapter 13, beginning at verse 1, lo. The word itself, this little word means, it's very simply this. This is important. This is important. Mine eye has seen all this, referring to what he has just listed in chapter 12 and before. Mine ear has heard and understood it. That's what Job is saying. This is what I know. This is what I've learned. This is what I understand. And we, having a completed Bible, knowing the facts of the Bible and what it says that God will do, and comparing it to what has happened even before the Bible, hundreds of years before the Bible was written, passing from word of mouth from one generation to the next generation. It is amazing how God's truth is brought down from generation to generation to generation. There really is no escaping God's truth. It has just what Job says. I've learned all this. Verse 2. What you know, the you here is his three friends. Okay? What you, Job's three friends, know, the same do I know also. I am not inferior to you. The three friends had painted a picture of Job being spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally inferior to them. And at the same time, they were painting a picture to Job how spiritual, how mature, how knowledgeable they were, and that Job ought to be listening to them. And Job, having given all of these facts, he now says, hey, I am just like you. I have the same abilities you have. I have the same knowledge you have. I have the same understanding you have. Yeah, he's not inferior to them. Verse 3, surely I, Job, speak to the Almighty. Surely I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to reason with God. And he goes back to what he said in the very beginning, when he became desperately ill, that he wanted to, figuratively speaking, sit down with God. And he's going to pour out his heart to God and ask God to give him the answers that he needs. He doesn't understand why. Because he knows what God said. Job is the most righteous man in the East. And if he is the most righteous man in the East, that means in the East, where they're living, where the three friends are and everybody else, his spiritual level is higher than theirs, is what that means. And so he has got a handle on things, but he don't know why. He can't reason this out in his mind that God would basically bring him down to just barely clinging to life with nothing. Just hanging in there. And he doesn't understand. He wants to know the answers. His three friends certainly are not giving him the answers that he needs. Number 4, verse 4. But you, his three friends, are forgers of lies. Wow. Now that's a pretty powerful statement that he makes. What he is saying to them, right to their face. The three of you have put together a system of lies, things that are not true. Principally, what they would put together from their studies, as they said that they had studied all these things out in the very beginning of the book of Job. They said that they had done all this, but the conclusion they had come to was the same conclusion that the general populace of the world was, and we pointed it out before. If you are successful and everything is going your way, God is blessing you. But if you're not successful and it's not going your way, and God is not blessing you because you are a sinner. And in Job's case, because of the severity of what Job was going through, they concluded that Job must have a whole list of private sins that nobody knows anything about that has brought God's judgment down upon him. And of course, they were ignoring what God had said. Job is the most righteous man in the East. And he said it twice on two different occasions. And who would dare call God a liar? If Job really is the most righteous man in the East, that means that everybody else is beneath him in righteousness. They come up very short. The theory that the three friends were saying that was causing Job's problem doesn't even make sense in light of all of that. It's not even rational in any way. So what is the answer? Job himself doesn't know yet what the answer is. He doesn't know that the devil put him in a position that God was going to test Job. And of course, God knows everything. He knows what the outcome is going to be, to see if Job was as holy and as righteous as it appeared to be. And Job was and is. But these three, in their human rationale and human wisdom, was overlooking the facts as they really were and could have been seen. Oh, verse 5, that you, referring to the three friends, would altogether hold your peace. Meaning, all three of you, I don't want to hear anything more from you about this. All right? And it should be your wisdom, meaning that what he states here to hold their peace would be their wisest thing to do. Instead of telling Job that he is this terrible sinner, he needs to confess in order to be delivered from all this, be quiet. Don't say anything more. That will be wisdom on your part, is what he is inferring here. Verse 6, hear now, he says, my reasoning. This is how I'm reasoning. And hearken to the pleadings of my lips. Hear my words. This is reasonable. Listen to me. Act upon this. Do what I've asked you to do, is what he is saying. 7, verse 7. Will you, the three friends, speak wickedly for God? And that's what he's classifying it as. Wickedly, because they're contradicting God's statement that Job was the most righteous man in all the East. They were contradicting that. You're a great sinner. Now, he couldn't be a great sinner and the most righteous man in all the East. That won't fly. That boat sinks. That plane won't take off. It won't get off the ground. So he says to them, you speak wickedly. Will you speak wickedly for God and talk deceitfully for him? So he's pointing out that their entire reasoning and what they were saying is an offense to God and what he said. Verse 8, will you accept his person, the person of God? He says to his three friends, will you contend for God? Are you really going to receive him Are you going to trust him? Are you going to learn and know the righteousness of God and know that he's truthful and so on? He's pointing this out. You going to go with God or not? Verse 9. Is it good that he should search you, he being God? Is it good that he, God, should search you, the three of you, search you out, or as one man mocketh another, do you so mock him? Referring to God. They were mocking God by saying that Job was this great sinner, when God had clearly declared publicly that Job on two separate occasions was the most righteous man in the East. So they're mocking God. They're ridiculing God. They are putting God down. That ship don't sail. Yeah. All right. Verse 10. He will surely, God will surely reprove you. Meaning, the reprove here means he will correct your thinking. If you do secretly accept persons. And what he is saying there, if you're going behind the scenes and continuing on with this whole issue that you are laying out before me, you are the ones that are in trouble with the Lord. You're going to have to give an account to him in regards to this. Verse 11. Shall not his excellency, referring to the Lord, make you afraid, and his dread fall upon you? You are the ones that should be fearing God, Job is saying to them. What you are implying and what you're saying and all that you're insisting upon is contrary to the plan, will, and purpose of God. It's contrary to what God said. It isn't going to work. You can't do that. Wow. Verse 12. Your remembrance are like unto ashes. What they remember and think they know, he is saying, is as worthless as ashes are. Ashes have really virtually no real practical use at all. Nothing in a practical way. And he's saying, that's where you come to. Your reasoning is not even rational on this. Your bodies, to bodies of clay, eventually you're going to go back to the earth from which you were made by God. And you don't realize this. You're elevating yourself above God. You're setting things forth that is not true. We got to get a grip here. Yeah. Verse 13. Hold your peace, he says to them. Let me alone. Don't bother me, Job. That I, Job, may speak, and let come on me what will. You let me alone. You quit pestering me with this. You quit putting me down with this. You leave me alone, and I'm going to do what I've been doing, the way that I've been doing it, in a godly manner that put me in a position where I was the righteous man in all the East. I'm going to keep doing that, and I'll accept whatever God does on that. I'll accept that as his will. Verse 14. Wherefore do I take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in my hand. Putting his flesh in his teeth is basically saying this. It's as if I'm going to eat myself. I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to live like I've always done. And we saw how Job lived before all this began to happen. Very godly man, concerned about his family spiritually, wanted to be sure that they were in right relationship with God. He was living a holy and godly lifestyle consistently. Really, that's what Christians are supposed to do today as well. Live a holy, godly lifestyle consistently, day after day, day after day. Yeah. He says, I'm willing to take this in my own hand. I'm willing for God to hold me accountable to it on that case. Verse 15. Though he, the Lord, slay me, yet will I trust in him, the Lord. But I will maintain my own ways before him. Again, he affirms, I'm going to live a godly life like I've done all these years. I'm in the hand of God. If he slays me, so be his will. Just like what he's experiencing right now, with all the pain, suffering, loss, misery, the whole 9 yards, so be his will.